Hi everybody and welcome Craig. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Been a great and interesting championship.
Yeah, it has. I mean,
and build up to the World Cup.
Yeah, I think that's the bigger picture, of course, and you always want to only read so much into the championship ahead of a World Cup because there's that old history of no team having won the Tri-Nations or the Rugby Championship and then going on to win a World Cup. But I think that's all semantics. I think the Boks
Do you believe in that curse?
Not really. No, I think the Boks know exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to. I mean, they were undefeated in the championship. I think if you'd given them that sort of build-up, I mean, Rusty a year ago would have bitten your arm off to kind of have that sort of run into the World Cup. I think it's been the perfect build-up for them. Besides the news this week of Swayze de Bruin pulling out of that management team. Otherwise, I think almost every box they would have wanted to tick, they've managed to do so, which has been great for them. They got all the momentum now going towards that World Cup. And as we were chatting about off air, whether that suddenly builds a bit of pressure on you, whereas they had probably 12 months ago been flying under the radar and might have gone to the World Cup without many expectations. Now everyone's talking about them being the Springboks of old and a team that could really contend for that World Cup. It's not a bad thing, but it does add a bit more pressure.
For sure, and I think if you look at it, the championship's been great for the Springboks. But we must remember to keep our feet on the ground and show a bit of humility.
Yeah.
We haven't arrived yet, and under Alistair, I think we had no chance of arriving. I mean, the Boks were heading to 10-1 outsiders, and now I think they're probably second favourites to win the World Cup. The way that they dismantled Argentina was majestic. Their draw in Wellington and their destruction of Australia. It's been a great period for rugby in South Africa, but I think now people are starting to write off the Kiwis. Certainly the Kiwis aren't writing themselves off, and I think it's a dangerous position to be in. If a year ago with all the stuff that was going on in rugby in this country, quotas and this and that and everything else, there was such a doom and gloom around. And remember that video that was going around with that guy that impersonated Hugh Bladen, Joel Stransky, after our loss to Italy?
Yeah, I mean, there were videos of people burning their Springbok jerseys just a couple of years ago, throwing it in the fire and saying, I'm done with the Boks. So just from that point of view, there's an undeniable good feeling about the Boks again. And you kind of go now towards that World Cup, and it's great to have that feeling, but it'll all change very quickly if they unravel in that opening game against the All Blacks. And that's why I think you make a good point in saying we have to keep our feet on the ground a little bit, because as much as you can achieve in a rugby championship or in the lead up to the World Cup, it's a very different beast when you're suddenly playing in Japan. And at the last World Cup, the Boks were playing against Japan, and everything that was expected of them, went the other way, and they suffered that huge shock upset. So
when we look at the build-up to the Rugby World Cup, who are the teams you think could possibly win it? Where would you rate them, from 1 to 5 or 6?
Well, I've just done for the next issue of the magazine, gone head-to-head with John.
Which magazine's that? SARugbymag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just checking.
Just a cheeky punt.
So, we went head-to-head. John Cardinelli said the All Blacks, and I went with a little bit of heart overhead, and I said the Springboks. So,
what's it like going head-to-head with John Cardinelli?
Well, as long as I'm proved right, then it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah.
So
is he backing the All Blacks?
He's still backing the All Blacks, and I think it's understandable. I mean, back-to-back world champions, and clearly also not writing them off, as I don't think we should do. So I'd still say there's very little to choose between the All Blacks and the Springboks. I think Ireland could still.
I think right now the Springboks are a better team, man for man, depth. You look. I mean, it doesn't matter who wins. To me, it doesn't matter who wins that first game. It's a momentum play.
Yeah.
But both those teams are going to advance to the next round. They can't play each other till the finals, if indeed both of them get there.
Sure.
Do you think that that's true? Does it matter who wins that game?
I think just in terms of just laying down an early marker and making a statement. I think it's more about confidence building. I don't, and I think you also want to avoid Ireland in the quarterfinals, because I think that's another potentially. So that in terms of finishing top of the group and facing an easier team in the quarterfinals.
I think you want to play Ireland in the quarterfinals.
Would you?
Yeah, because I don't think they're going to have much depth left after 3 or 4 games. They don't have the depth. I mean, you look at England, South Africa, and New Zealand, all those, and Wales. Those teams have depth, and they can go a long way into the tournament. Ireland is the one team I don't think can go too far into the tournament. Remember last World Cup? Didn't they lose to Argentina?
I think, yeah, they did. I think it was Argentina.
Yeah, in the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
I think that's the team that we're going to see from an Ireland point of view. Is they're great now, but they're not the team that can get 5, 6, 7 injuries, and that's what's going to happen in the World Cup to almost every team that's competing. You're going to sit with 4 or 5 injuries, and I think Ireland is the team we want to face in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I mean, I just think Ireland are still potentially strong contenders.
Yeah.
And I think England, like you said, I think England with a couple of injuries have kind of lost a little bit of their momentum. And I don't know whether you still...
They beat Wales last weekend, the number 1 team in the world at the time.
For 24 hours.
I'll take the 24 hours, because in my lifetime I never thought that we would ever be number 1.
Yeah.
Even if it's for 24, even if it's for a day.
Do you think Wales will be a title contender?
Well, I'm Welsh, and no. It's like I'm used to. I was a wee lad in the 70s, so I still have those fond memories, and I still remember seeing the statues around Cardiff and stuff like that. So, but no. The short answer is no. We'll compete, and we'll probably get knocked out in the quarterfinals. In a close game like we did last time.
Yeah.
Having no aspirations on as a Welshman is a rite of passage when it comes to rugby now. So anything that we do will any further than we go in the quarterfinals, I'll be delighted.
Yeah, I think the All Blacks and the Springboks are your 2 leading teams still going into that tournament.
I would throw England in there.
As the Northern Hemisphere team.
No, I think England are capable of beating the All Blacks and South Africa on their day, and I think that they are I think there's 3 favourites to me, and I would have them. I'd say New Zealand. And England and South Africa there's not much to choose between those 3 teams. Yeah. What would be worrying and concerning for me as a New Zealand fan and supporter of New Zealand rugby is that New Zealand seem to be on their way down in terms of Dan Carter and Richie McCaw are not easily replaced. Both of them are the heart and soul of that team, yeah. And they're not easily replaced. They don't come off an assembly line, and New Zealand is feeling the effects of that, as some of the players, are getting a bit old in the tooth, and I just think that their rugby is not where it was, and it's been that way for a while. They've lost to Australia. They got hammered by Australia. Okay, red card. They drew with South Africa. They lost to South Africa in Wellington. They should have lost to South Africa in Pretoria. They beat England by 1 point. They lost to Australia again last year, I believe. And they lost to Ireland. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of losses in there, I'm saying. So for us not to think that New Zealand rugby is in a decline. Yeah. And these things tend to be cyclical,
Yeah, well, I think they're definitely vulnerable. I mean, they've shown that they do have some weaknesses and vulnerabilities that can be exposed. For me, it's a bit confusing in the backline why they've gone to this experimentation of moving Beauden Barrett, who's been their number 10, and the successor to Dan Carter, and they're now experimenting with him at fullback and Richie Mo'unga at fly half. It looks like they're just trying to get those 2 players in the same starting backline instead.
Well, when you lose games, Craig, so remember when Rassie had lost some games, and he was tinkering, and he wasn't, he deviated from his plan. I think the same thing's happening there. They're experimenting, and it's a national mourning. It's a national crisis when the All Blacks don't win in New Zealand. I've been there several times after games that they've lost. Yeah. And oh my God, it's hide the knives, the steak knives, the razor blades. So they take their rugby too seriously, I think. Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not too dissimilar in that the culture here is just to walk in on a Monday after the Boks have lost, and it's a very quiet office, or the other way around if they win. So. Yeah, for sure. That's going to be it's going to be interesting for me how they respond now to a defeat like that against the Wallabies. The margin of victory, with the with the red card. I mean, but even during the first half when they had a full complement of players, they still looked like they were struggling.
When he went off, they were trailing, I believe, still. So, yeah, it's. I'll be very interested. These games are terrible. These warm-up games now, because Wales had won 14 in a row. They put out a pretty strong side against England and were embarrassed. And I think Wales had the most to play for last week out of all the teams in terms of the warm-up games. You know, they had a full squad. They had 14 in a row. They just gotten to number one.
Yeah.
You know, so they had everything to play for. So I was disappointed in the Wales game. I was even more disappointed that Enscombe's out now for the World Cup, because these games mean nothing, absolutely nothing. I wouldn't have any of my first team players play any warm-up games, maybe 10, 20 minutes a run on, but nothing. I don't see the benefit to guys now. You're not competing for places. I think 90% of the teams have already been chosen.
Yeah.
So you might experiment with a few guys that you're still having a look at, but there's not. I don't know what the point is for Wales playing England, Ireland, and England in a warm-up to a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, it's maybe just the nature of those opponents that is a bit confusing, because I think they need some kind of game time and stuff. I mean, obviously the Boks, All Blacks, Argentina, Wallabies have a rugby championship where they play most of their best players, and they can use that just before World Cup to kind of hit the ground running when they get to Japan. So it's a long time if you don't have any meaningful game time between the Six Nations and a World Cup. So I understand the need to have something in between, but for back-to-back games against opponents that are going to really test you and potentially injure a star player like Anscombe, I mean, that's a massive blow for them, because they don't have the greatest depth at fly half. So I think that's a real significant blow to their chances at the World Cup.
Well, yeah. Again, as a Welshman, you just shake your head. I mean, it's like we're playing Ireland this weekend, I think, or the next game's against Ireland, and then England. So, you know, and Wales are already touting themselves as the fittest team going to the World Cup. You know, they say that's where they're gonna. That's where you're going to show up other teams. Keep working on the fitness. Stop working on the contact.
Yeah.
I think, and with that, let's get into this weekend's rugby, because it's interesting. Who do you think is the team that's got the most to prove this weekend? Let's take the South Africa-Argentina game and New Zealand-Australia game. Let's focus on those.
Yeah, for me, still All Blacks far and away the team with everything to prove, because they've got to kind of set themselves back on track. And when you lose to a Wallabies team like that, completely unexpected by such a huge margin, I don't really think the red card matters. I've seen 14-man All Blacks teams still produce results and find a way to win or keep it close, but they were blown off the park, during that period, that second half when they were one man short. And we've spoken of how we've seen little signs that this is not the All Blacks formidable, invincible All Blacks team of the past. So I think for them, they want to now come and go, we're starting to be written off, and we're going to prove that we are still world champions, and just send out a reminder of who they are and what they're capable of. For me, they have everything to prove this weekend, and I think it'll shape how we view the World Cup depending on how they perform.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that, to me, New Zealand do have everything to prove in terms of proving it to themselves, to get some sort of settled forward momentum going into this World Cup, because they've, the media is merciless in New Zealand when it comes to the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And Hansen, I think, has even said that he wants a 200% improvement in effort.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's such a thing as 200%. I just believe there's always 100%, and I like to see that.
Yeah.
But for me, and it's the game is in New Zealand, so they're home. The bookies have them at 14.5 to win by 14.5 points. And I think that's a safe bet, because I think they're going to hammer Australia this weekend.
Yeah.
I think there's two factors. One, Australia would have played the game of their lives last week reaching that summit of beating New Zealand gives them enough momentum and enough belief that they can beat anybody. They'd have nothing to prove, and then I wouldn't go there I think they'll be more experimental and wanting to get away from that encounter with no more injuries. So they'll go in on a low, and the Kiwis will go in on a complete high of wanting to dictate. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 25-30 point victory by the All Blacks this weekend. I think they're going to hammer Australia.
Yeah, I think that's quite a bold call, because the Wallabies are going in unchanged with their lineup, and the All Blacks, they have again experimented. So Steve Hansen's clearly not too afraid to still wield the axe and see what other players can offer. I do think they'll beat the Wallabies, and quite convincingly. I'd probably go between I'd probably say 15 points plus minus in
Oh, you're saying what the bookies are saying? Wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
There you go. Yeah. What would another loss for the All Blacks mean? It's unthinkable, isn't it?
It is unthinkable. I mean, to lose that Bledisloe Cup that they've kind of just held complete authority over.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think it would really just shake up that world order before the event in Japan.
Yeah. I'm going to give New Zealand take the minus 19 or give the points. So I think New Zealand are going to win by 14 or more. And I put 2,500 in on that to win back 4,200. And that New Zealand will absolutely throttle the Aussies this weekend.
All right.
And let's chat about South Africa, Argentina. Interesting team Rassi's going with, and I think Rassi is a genius, a rugby genius. I've said that when he came in, and he's done nothing to disprove my theory.
Yeah, I think in a really good way for the Springboks is that as a team, I don't think they have anything to prove. I think they've done everything they need to in the Rugby Championship. This now is an experimental team that is completely based around giving a few fringe players an opportunity to show what they can do and
wrap his players in cotton wool.
Yeah, and to put up a few of them to put up their hand and say I need to be part of that World Cup squad. So for individuals, a certain number of individuals, I think there's a lot to play for. As a team, I don't think the Boks need to worry too much about the result. Of course, they want to maintain the momentum, but they've picked a team that has got a lot of new faces because they want to see what a Marcel Coetzee can do at number 8 and Kobus Reina can do starting at scrum half, and the list goes on. So for them, I think it's just about a few players going, let me prove it with one last opportunity before the World Cup squad announcement what I can do, and then they go from there.
Yeah, the bookies have Springboks to win by 20 or more points. It's a lot of points.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a little bit too much based on the team that they've picked. But you also consider how easily they won in Salta. I'd probably say they're going to, I'd say Boks by 18, so just shy.
Just shy. There's a great atmosphere in the Boks camp right now, from by all accounts and from what I'm hearing and everybody's telling me. You know, I think that extra 2 weeks after the Super Rugby really helped with no teams competing in Super Rugby.
Yeah.
Gave Rassi that extra 2 weeks in camp with those players, and I think there's a collective unity there that hasn't been there for a long time. And Rassi's good at man management. You know, I think that he's a very strong character in terms of speaking his mind and getting everybody to buy into his plan and not making false promises to players. Everybody knows where they stand. Yeah,
I mean, I think every player I've spoken to speaks about how honest he is, and there's no hidden agendas. It's very much an open door policy. I listened to his press conference at the team announcement on Wednesday, and he says the players already know generally exactly what the makeup of the squad is going to be for the World Cup. He's 80% sure of what that squad is going to look like. He's already informed most of the players. There's only a small margin of wiggle room, and he's also clearly communicated that. So there's no grey areas. I think everyone knows exactly where they stand and what they've got to do if they're going to make that World Cup squad, if they're on the fringe. And most of the guys who are going to go already know exactly where they stand and that their ticket is booked.
Yeah, for sure. So you're saying 18?
Yeah.
This weekend? I think Argentina have everything to play for in this game. Because they've won 3 out of 22 tests, or 21 tests now. They've been in such a decline that they have to come here and make a statement to be considered as progressing to even the quarterfinals of the Rugby World.
Yeah, the key for them to have a chance of making that margin a little bit closer is to get their scrum back on track, because they got scrummed off the park in Salta. And that used to be a huge strength of theirs, and it was a little bit embarrassing actually how, I mean, all credit to Trevor Nyakani and Beast and Bongi Umanambi, who had put in an immense scrumming performance. The Boks have got a new front row again, so whether they can be as effective is a different story. But there were so many, all the momentum and penalties won at that scrum last weekend laid the foundation for victory. If it's not as dominant, then it might be a little bit closer.
Yeah, for sure. I think that Argentina will bring a decent side, and I think 20 points is too much. You know, I think that Argentina will probably lose by 10, 11 points. So there's a big wiggle room in there for me on the betting front. So I'm going to put 3,000 Rand down and give Argentina plus 19.5 because it's moved out. It's narrowing as we speak. I'm going to take I'm going to take this. I believe the Springboks will win, so don't say that I'm not backing the Springboks. I just don't think they'll win by 21 or more points. And it should be another interesting week of rugby.
Yeah.
Weekend of rugby.
For sure.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.
Cheers, bud.